Hello, I'm Russell Sturgis. Welcome to the fifth instalment in our current series on how EAP works, or how awareness and mindfulness works. Over the last few weeks I've been looking at the concepts of awareness, being strategic, the concept of bioplasticity and neural pathways, neuroplasticity, and today we're looking at the concept of mindfulness itself. Now, mindfulness has become a very popular word these days, and there's a lot of different thoughts out there, and EAP is kind of unique in terms of how it approaches this idea of mindfulness. As previously discussed, I've talked about this concept of pragmatic laziness as being the basis of how EAP works, and the pragmatic part of it being this idea of developing new knowledge and understanding. So this is the learning and the strategizing that is developed as a mechanism for being able to create sustainable transformation or change. Now that's the pragmatic part, and I've suggested that the lazy part is the place where we maintain mindfulness as opposed to exerting personal will. And of course, mindfulness is the demonstration of faith that there's a trust in divine will. And so it's about the allowance of divine will to then become the thing that inspires and promotes the choices that you make, as opposed to personal will. And of course, I've talked about the differences between EAP and, say, life coaching, for example, where in life coaching what you would have would be a series of strategies that you would then establish as goals, with elements of accountability and this striving, this exertion of personal will to reach the goals. The laziness part of EAP is that we don't ask you to do that. We actually invite you to maintain this constant awareness. So in other words, when we say maintain awareness, what we're saying is that you can remember the new information and knowledge and understanding that you have in any instant. And of course, the extension of that maintenance of that awareness is twofold, and the first part of that is that in being mindful, you're able to look at either your habits and programming or your new knowledge and understanding, which is your new awareness, and you're able to also see what the impact of either of those would be. So in other words, part of mindfulness is being able to observe how people around you, how you would be impacted, how others would be impacted, how the planet would be impacted if you were to choose one or other of these different choices that are presented through either your habit and programming or through this new knowledge. The next thing that you do in this place of mindfulness is then to consider, so if this is the impact, then how does this serve, either for good or bad, in terms of myself and other people and the planet. So mindfulness is having this whole of life perspective where you're able to recognize that there's a choice, but in recognizing the choice, you also recognize what the impact and what the benefits are as a result of if you were to implement either of those choices. So this is really what mindfulness is about. Now, when we're not in the place of being aware and therefore mindful, our default in terms of how we turn up in the world is our programming and our habits. So research suggests that we function 95% of the time subconsciously, and we rely on those habits and programming as the basis of being able to turn up in the world in that way. So as we become more mindful, the default shifts to the capacity to remember that I have a choice. And so we've gone from not having a choice to being able to maintain the awareness of the new knowledge as well as the awareness of our old habits, and recognize in that moment that we have a choice. So the default becomes our ability to maintain choice. So we've gone from no choice, where we've just acted out of our programming, to now having a choice. Now, the interesting thing is that there's a point at which our default goes from choice to compassion. So in other words, when we start to ask that question, I write about this in the blog, about how is this serving, this is really saying, how is this loving to me and to another and to the planet? And so when we start to engage the question of how it's loving, then we start to invite compassion, because we see an opportunity to act in a way that's better serving, which is being more compassionate. So that what ends up happening is that the default eventually becomes a constant awareness of compassion, and associated with that is the default towards acting benevolently. So that 100% of the time we're able to function from this place of being aware and mindful as it relates to how we act benevolently from this place of compassion. So mindfulness is quite dynamic in terms of what it represents, because it's this evolution from being non-mindful, where the default is staying in our story and functioning from our habits and program, where we move into this place of recognizing that we have a choice, and eventually coming from this place where we're able to see that the ultimate benefit to everybody involved comes from this place of compassion, and we begin to live our life. And I use the word devotion, and we actually develop a life that becomes devoted to compassion and benevolence. So that means that our default consciousness is one of compassion and benevolence. And that means that we move through life doing two things quite strongly. One is being aware of what's going on in people around us, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, as well as what's going on within us, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and being able to be inspired, and this is being mindful of our intuition in terms of how to respond and act to what's happening around us, and the compassion that we have that's fueling our awareness at this point. And what I like to call the still small voice, or this voice that we are able to recognize in this place of living in stillness. As we move into this place of being more mindful and compassionate, we develop this capacity for stillness, and so we are able to hear this inspired voice that goes beyond sometimes even our own intuition. This is something that's quite inspirational. And so mindfulness is then applied to being able to observe and hear the choices that are inspired by what I call divine will, as opposed to personal will. So mindfulness is quite a dynamic part of being able to live life with this state of stillness and with this state of awareness of another and of self, and that there becomes a point where that becomes the default. And the choice at that point comes on whether it's more prudent to act lovingly to oneself than it is to another, or vice versa, depending on what the understanding is and the context in which compassion can be applied in those sort of circumstances. I hope this gives you a little bit more of an appreciation of the EAP approach to mindfulness, and in fact that's what the whole EAP program is about, is helping to bring people to this place of mindfulness. And the third unit in our program is called Being Mindful, and it invites the opportunity for the participant to consider what a life devoted to benevolence would look like, and what it would mean in terms of their reality, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Please, to find out more about what we do, go to our website, eapmentor.com. Also, we have a wonderful Facebook page which is Enhances Awareness Program, and there you're going to find on a daily basis information being put up there that helps to expand your understanding and knowledge in order to become aware so that you can live more mindfully and be more compassionate in how you turn up in the world. Thank you for following this series. Next time I'm going to be talking about how important gratitude is in helping to facilitate this shift from our default mode from our story and our programming and habits to living mindfully with compassion. Anyway, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy the blog, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.